Captain Jeho Kim stood at the massive window of the Stellar Dream spaceport terminal. He watched as the morning sun reflected off his ship's silver hull. The Stellar Dream was the finest passenger vessel ever built by humans. At over 2 kilometers long, it looked like a floating city made of metal and glass. Today was going to be another busy day. The ship was preparing for its monthly journey from Earth to the colonies on Mars and beyond. Jeho had been captain for 5 years, but he still felt excited before each trip. He straightened his white uniform and checked his tablet one last time. "Captain, the passenger list is ready for your review," said Su Mei Li, his head flight attendant. She had worked with him for 3 years and was the best at her job. "Thank you, Su Mei. How many passengers do we have today?" "We have 3,000 passengers, sir. All cabins are full." Su Mei pulled up the list on her own tablet. "And we have some special guests today." Jeho raised an eyebrow. "Special guests?" "Yes, sir. Marcus Big Shaq Thompson is traveling in first class. He's going to Mars for a special basketball game." Su Mei smiled. "The crew is very excited." Jeho nodded. He had heard of Big Shaq. Everyone had. The basketball star was famous not just for his playing, but also for his kindness off the court. Still, celebrity passengers could sometimes be difficult. "Anything else I should know?" Su Mei scrolled through her tablet. "Well, there is one more thing. We have a decorated Space Force veteran in economy class, Han Sol Park." Jeho's head snapped up. Han Sol Park. The Han Sol Park, the hero of the Proxima Centauri conflict. "The same one, sir." Su Mei lowered her voice. "He's traveling alone. According to his medical information, he uses a mobility aid now. The doctors say it's from his injuries during the battle." Jeho felt his chest tighten. He remembered watching the news feeds during the conflict. Han Sol Park had saved Earth's entire defense fleet from destruction. His actions had protected millions of lives, but at a great personal cost. "Why is he in economy?" Jeho asked. "That's all he booked, sir. Should we upgrade him?" Jeho shook his head sadly. "We can't. All the higher-class cabins are full, and regulations prevent us from bumping other passengers without cause." The terminal was getting busier now. Through the window, Jeho could see the ground crews finishing their work around the massive ship. Soon, boarding would begin. Du Won Kang, another crew member, rushed up to them. "Captain, the pre-flight checks are complete. Engineering reports all systems are green." "Good. Let's begin boarding in 30 minutes. Jeho straightened his collar again. "Su Mei, make sure all crew members know about Mr. Park. I want him treated with the utmost respect, even if we can't upgrade his seat." As the morning continued, passengers began filling the terminal. Jeho watched them from his position near the boarding gate. Families with children, business travelers, tourists, all of them excited about their journey through space. Then he saw him. Han Sol Park walked slowly through the crowd, leaning on his mechanical mobility aid. He wore simple clothes, just a gray jacket and black pants. Nothing about him suggested he was one of humanity's greatest heroes. But Jeho could see the way he carried himself, the quiet dignity in his movements. A few minutes later, there was a stir in the crowd. Marcus Big Shaq Thompson had arrived. At over 7 feet tall, he towered above everyone else. He wore expensive clothes and was surrounded by several assistants. But unlike some celebrities, he stopped to sign autographs and take pictures with fans. Jeho watched as Big Shaq made his way toward the first-class boarding area. The basketball star passed close to where Han Sol Park sat quietly waiting for economy boarding to begin. Big Shaq walked past without noticing him, but Jeho saw Han Sol's eyes follow the athlete with interest. "He probably watches basketball," Su Mei said quietly, appearing at Jeho's side. "I heard that many veterans followed sports during their recovery. It gave them something to focus on." Jeho nodded. "Begin boarding procedures, Su Mei. First-class passengers first, then business, then economy. The boarding process was smooth, as always. Ji-ho watched Big Shaq duck his head to enter the first-class boarding bridge. The basketball star's assistants carried his bags, while he stopped to take one last selfie with a young fan. When it was time for economy boarding, Ji-ho made sure to position himself near the gate. As Han-Sol Park approached, walking carefully with his mobility aid, the captain stood at attention and saluted. Han-Sol seemed surprised but returned the salute with perfect form. "Thank you, Captain, but that's not necessary. I'm just another passenger today." "No, sir," Ji-ho said firmly. "You're never just another passenger. Welcome aboard the Stellar Dream." A small smile crossed Han-Sol's face. He nodded and made his way onto the ship, moving slowly but steadily. Once all passengers were aboard, Ji-ho walked through the ship to the bridge. The Stellar Dream's corridors were wide and bright, with soft blue lighting that helped keep passengers calm during space travel. In first class, he passed Big Shaq's luxury suite. The basketball star was already settled in, his long legs stretched out on the reclining seat as he watched something on the entertainment screen. In economy class, Ji-ho found Han-Sol Park, carefully storing his mobility aid in the overhead compartment. The veteran had been assigned an aisle seat at least, but the space was still tight. Sumai was there, helping him get comfortable. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Park?" she asked. "No, thank you. I'm fine." Han-Sol's voice was quiet but clear. "I've traveled in much worse conditions than this." Ji-ho continued to the bridge, his mind troubled. It didn't seem right that a hero should travel in such cramped conditions while others enjoyed luxury. But rules were rules, and the ship was full. At the bridge, the crew was ready for departure. Through the massive forward windows, Earth's curve was visible against the black of space. Soon, they would leave orbit and begin their journey to Mars. "All systems check complete, Captain," reported the chief engineer. "We're ready for departure." Ji-ho took his seat in the captain's chair. He pressed the button for the ship-wide announcement system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Ji-ho Kim speaking. Welcome aboard the Stellar Dream. We are preparing for departure from Earth orbit. Our journey to Mars will take approximately 3 days at standard faster-than-light speed. Please make sure your safety harnesses are secured and all loose items are properly stored." As he finished the announcement, Ji-ho thought about his 2 special passengers, a sports star and a war hero, separated by just a few cabin classes, but worlds apart in their circumstances. Little did he know that their paths would soon cross in an unexpected way. "Release docking clamps," he ordered. "Begin departure sequence." The Stellar Dream hummed to life around them. Another journey was about to begin, but this one would be different from all the others. As the massive ship moved away from Earth's orbit, none of its passengers knew they were about to witness something extraordinary. The Stellar Dream cruised smoothly through space, 3 hours into its journey. Sumai Lee walked through the economy class cabin, checking on passengers. She noticed Han-Sol Park trying to stand up from his seat, his movements careful and measured. "May I help you, Mr. Park?" Sumai asked, stepping closer. "Thank you. I need to reach the restroom," Han-Sol said. His face showed no pain, but Sumai could see how tightly he gripped his mobility aid. The aisle was narrow, and other passengers had left bags sticking out slightly from under their seats. Sumai quickly moved ahead, quietly asking people to tuck their belongings in. She watched as Han-Sol made his way forward, each step precise and determined. In the crew rest area, Do-won Kang was reviewing passenger profiles on his tablet. Sumai joined him after helping Han-Sol return to his seat. "Do-won, did you know who Han-Sol Park is?" she asked, pouring herself a cup of water. Do-won looked up. "The man in economy. Seat 45C. "Yes, I was just looking at his service record." Sumai showed Do-won her tablet. "He's the one who saved Earth's defense fleet 5 years ago." Do-won's eyes widened as he read the screen. "The Battle of Proxima Station. That was him. Su-mai nodded. He was commanding the patrol ship Swift Guardian when the enemy fleet appeared. They had some new weapon that could disable our larger ship's shields. I remember watching the news, Do-won said. A small patrol ship somehow stopped the entire enemy fleet. That patrol ship was Hansol's. He figured out that the enemy weapon had a weak spot. But to exploit it, someone had to get dangerously close. Su-mai's voice grew quiet. He flew his ship right into the middle of their fleet. The crew rest area door opened, and Tae-young Choi, the security officer, entered. He had overheard their conversation. The history books don't tell the whole story, Tae-young said, sitting down with them. I served in the Space Force back then. What Park did was practically impossible. He had to fly through their entire defense screen, timing it perfectly between their weapon pulses. Did you know him? Do-won asked. Tae-young shook his head. No, but every Space Force member knows his story. He disabled their weapon system, but the explosion damaged his ship. The doctors said he would never walk normally again. Meanwhile, in the first-class cabin, Marcus Big Shaq Thompson was having trouble sleeping despite the comfortable suite. The game announcer's words from his last match kept echoing in his mind. Thompson shows us once again why he's not just a great player, but a great human being. Big Shaq stood up, his head nearly touching the cabin ceiling. He needed to walk around to clear his mind. The luxury cabin felt too small suddenly, despite being the largest on the ship. He stepped out into the first-class corridor, nodding to other passengers who stared at his famous face. As he walked, he overheard voices from the crew rest area. The door was slightly open, and words drifted out clearly. The amazing thing is, Su-mai was saying, Park never asked for any special treatment. He turned down all the medals they tried to give him. Said he was just doing his job. Big Shaq slowed his steps, listening. And now he's traveling in economy, Do-won added. With that injury, in those tight seats. The doctor's report says the neural damage is permanent, Su-mai continued. Every step must hurt, but you'd never know it from his face. Big Shaq moved past the door before the crew noticed him. He walked to the observation deck, a special area reserved for first-class passengers. Through the large windows, he could see the stars streaking by as the ship traveled faster than light. His mind went back to 5 years ago. His cousin had been serving on one of the fleet's ships during that battle. She had told him about the small patrol ship that saved them all, about the commander who sacrificed everything to stop the attack. Looking at his reflection in the window, Big Shaq remembered his own path to success. People saw his expensive clothes, his luxury suite, his fame. But he remembered sleeping on a thin mattress in his grandmother's apartment, practicing basketball in the rain, because the indoor courts were too expensive. In economy class, Hansol Park was looking through old photos on his tablet. They showed him in his Space Force uniform, standing proud and straight. Another photo showed his ship, the Swift Guardian, small but fast. His fingers traced the image gently. A small child from the seat ahead peeked back at him. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at his tablet. Hansol smiled. "That's a spaceship, a small one, but very brave." "Like you?" the child asked innocently. Hansol's smile turned sad. "The ship was the brave one. I just flew where it needed to go." The child's mother turned around. "I'm sorry if she's bothering you, sir." "No bother at all," Hansol said. "Children should be curious about space. It's their future." Captain Jae-ho Kim walked through the ship, making his routine checks. He passed through first class, where he saw Big Shaq standing at the observation window, looking unusually thoughtful. In economy, he saw Hansol showing his tablet to the young child, his face gentle and patient. In the crew area, Jae-ho found Su-mai, updating the passenger logs. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes, Captain." Although Su-mai hesitated. "Mr. Park's mobility aid is a bit too big for the economy storage spaces. We had to store it awkwardly." Jae-ho frowned. "Make sure it's secure. We can't have it falling during turbulence. Already done, sir. Aunt Sumai looked at her captain. I think some of the crew members have been talking about Mr. Park's history in the crew rest area. That's fine, as long as they're respectful, Jai-ho said. Our crew should know about the heroes they're serving. What neither of them knew was that those crew conversations had been overheard by exactly the right person at exactly the right time. As the Stellar Dream continued its journey through space, pieces were falling into place for something extraordinary. Big Shaq sat back in his luxury suite, but he couldn't relax. He kept thinking about the veteran in economy class, about his cousin who served in the fleet, about all the twists of fate that had brought them all to this ship at this moment. He reached for the cabin communication panel. His finger hovered over the button that would call for service. In his mind, he could hear his grandmother's voice. Success means nothing if you forget where you came from. And it means even less if you forget those who made your success possible. Big Shaq pressed the button. This is Marcus Thompson. Could I speak with the captain? I have a request to make. Captain Jae-ho Kim hurried to the first-class cabin after receiving Marcus Thompson's call. As he walked, he wondered what the famous basketball player might want. In his experience, celebrity requests usually meant trouble. Security Officer Tai-yum Choi followed behind the captain. It was standard procedure when dealing with high-profile passengers. They found Big Shaq waiting in his luxury suite, standing near the window. Mr. Thompson, Jai-ho said politely. How can we help you? Big Shaq turned to face them. Despite his height, his expression was humble. Captain, I understand you have a Space Force veteran in economy class. Han Sol Park. Jai-ho's eyebrows rose slightly. This was not what he had expected. Yes, that's correct. I want to switch seats with him, Big Shaq said simply. Tai-yum stepped forward, his security training making him suspicious. Mr. Thompson, if you're unhappy with your suit. No. Big Shaq held up his hands. The suite is perfect. That's why I want Mr. Park to have it. He looked at the captain. My cousin served on the Earth Defense Fleet 5 years ago. She was there during the Battle of Proxima Station. Jai-ho understood immediately. She was on one of the ships he saved. Yes, Big Shaq's voice grew quiet. She told me about that day. About the small patrol ship that saved them all. I didn't know it was Mr. Park until I overheard your crew talking, but now that I know. He straightened up. It's not right for him to be cramped in economy while I'm here in luxury. Sumai Lee had joined them by now, standing quietly in the doorway. She had brought the passenger manifest and relevant regulations on her tablet. Captain, she said, according to regulations, voluntary seat swaps are permitted as long as both parties agree and all fees are properly handled. Jai-ho nodded slowly. Mr. Thompson, are you sure about this? The economy seat will be very uncomfortable for someone of your height. I've had worse, Big Shaq smiled. I played my first games on a crooked court with a broken backboard. Comfort isn't everything. The captain turned to Sumai. Please check if this switch would cause any issues with our passenger protocols. Sumai quickly reviewed her tablet. The only concern is Mr. Park's mobility aid. It needs proper storage space, which the first-class suite actually provides better than economy. Then it's settled, Big Shaq said. He reached for his small bag. I can move my things. Wait, Tai-yum interrupted. We need to follow proper procedures. First, we need Mr. Park's agreement. Then we need to update all passenger records and security protocols. Do-won Kang appeared at the door. Captain, we're approaching a solar wind disturbance. We should make any passenger moves before we hit the turbulence. Jai-ho looked at his crew, then at Big Shaq. In his 20 years of spaceflight, he had never seen anything quite like this. Celebrities usually demanded special treatment, not offered to give it up. Sumai, please go speak with Mr. Park. Explain the situation carefully. Make it clear that this is entirely his choice. The captain turned to Big Shaq. Mr. Thompson, we'll need you to fill out some forms. As Sume hurried to economy class, Big Shaq sat down to handle the paperwork. Tae-young watched him carefully, still not quite believing what was happening. My grandmother would be proud, Big Shaq said quietly as he signed the forms. She always said true greatness isn't about how high you can rise, but how many people you can lift up with you. In economy class, Sume found Han-sol Park reading quietly. The child who had talked to him earlier was now sleeping, while her mother worked on a laptop. "Mr. Park," Sume said softly, "could I speak with you privately?" Han-sol looked up, concern crossing his face. "Is something wrong?" "No, sir. Actually," Sume paused, choosing her words carefully. "We have a passenger who would like to switch seats with you. They're offering their first-class suite." Han-sol's expression changed to confusion. "Switch seats? Why would anyone want to?" "It's Marcus Thompson, sir. Sume explained about Big Shaq, overhearing the crew's conversation, about his cousin in the fleet. Han-sol's face showed surprise, then something else. A mix of emotions Sume couldn't quite read. "That's very kind, but I couldn't accept. I'm fine here." "Sir," Sume said gently, "Mr. Thompson insists. He specifically asked for you to have his suite. He says it's the least he can do." Back in first class, Jae-ho was reviewing the proper protocols with Tae-young. "We'll need to update the passenger manifest, adjust the meal service plans, and modify the security arrangements. And the landing procedures," Tae-young added. "First-class passengers disembark before economy." Big Shaq looked up from his paperwork. "Could we keep this quiet? I don't want reporters or anything. This isn't about publicity." Jae-ho nodded approvingly. The basketball star's request made him respect the man even more. Do-won rushed back into the suite. "Captain, the solar wind disturbance is getting stronger. We should make any moves within the next 30 minutes. The ship's communication system crackled. "Bridge to Captain Kim." Jae-ho pressed the response button. "Kim here." "Sir, the turbulence from the solar winds will reach us soon. Should we delay passenger movement until after?" The captain looked at his crew, then at Big Shaq. They all knew that moving passengers during turbulence could be dangerous, but waiting would mean several uncomfortable hours for everyone involved. "How long until the turbulence hits?" Jae-ho asked. 28 minutes, sir." Sume's voice came through on the crew communication channel. "Captain, I've spoken with Mr. Park. He's reluctant to accept." Big Shaq stood up. "Maybe I should talk to him myself." Jae-ho considered this for a moment. Protocol suggested keeping passengers in their assigned sections, but this was an unusual situation. "Sume, please bring Mr. Park to the crew meeting room near first class. We'll meet there." The captain turned to Big Shaq. "Mr. Thompson, if you're willing to speak with him directly." Big Shaq nodded. Some things need to be said face to face. As they walked to the meeting room, the ship's lights flickered slightly, the first sign of the approaching solar winds. Time was running short, but some things couldn't be rushed. Tae-young checked his security tablet. "Captain, should I clear the corridors for this meeting?" "No," Jae-ho decided. "We'll keep everything normal. The last thing either of them would want is to make a scene." The crew meeting room was small but comfortable. As they waited for Sume to bring Han-sol Park, Big Shaq looked out the window at the approaching solar storm. The space ahead of them was beginning to shimmer with energy. "Sometimes," Big Shaq said quietly, "the right thing is also the hardest thing to accept." The crew meeting room was quiet as Han-sol Park entered, supported by his mobility aide. Sume Lee stood close by, ready to help if needed. Captain Jae-ho Kim and Tae-young Choi stepped aside, making space for the veteran to sit down. Big Shaq rose from his chair, careful not to bump his head on the low ceiling. Even in the spacious meeting room, he had to bend slightly. Han-sol looked up at the basketball star, his expression calm but questioning. "Mr. Park," Big Shaq said, his voice softer than most people would expect from such a large man. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Hansol nodded politely. Miss Lee said you wanted to switch seats. That's very kind, but really not necessary. Please, let me explain. Big Shaq sat down, bringing himself closer to eye level with the veteran. 5 years ago, during the Battle of Proxima Station, my cousin was serving on the EDF Phoenix. Hansol's face changed slightly at the mention of the ship's name. The Phoenix had been one of the largest vessels in Earth's defense fleet that day. She was a communications officer, Big Shaq continued. When the enemy fleet appeared, she sent me a message. She thought it would be her last. He paused, his hands clasped together. But then a small patrol ship appeared. The Swift Guardian, Hansol said quietly. She was a good ship. My cousin told me what happened next. How that small ship flew straight through the enemy fleet. How its commander figured out the weakness in their weapon. Big Shaq leaned forward. She said it was like watching someone thread a needle while riding a lightning bolt. Hansol looked down at his hands. We did what was needed. Nothing more. That's not how my cousin tells it. Big Shaq smiled gently. She's alive today because of what you did. She has 3 children now. The youngest one is learning to play basketball. The ship's lights flickered again, reminding everyone of the approaching solar winds. Captain Jeho checked his tablet nervously. 15 minutes until the turbulence, sir, Do-1 reported from the doorway. Big Shaq continued, speaking more quickly now. When I heard your name, when I realized who you were, I knew I had to do something. Taking a cramped economy seat for a few days is nothing compared to what you gave up. I didn't give up anything. Hansol protested. I served, like thousands of others. Not like you. Tae-young spoke up suddenly. Everyone turned to look at the security officer. Sorry, sir, but I served too. What you did that day, it changed everything. Changed how we think about courage. Hansol shook his head. Young man, courage isn't about grand gestures. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. Even when no one is watching. He looked at Big Shaq, like giving up a comfortable seat to a stranger. Not a stranger, Big Shaq said firmly. Family. My cousin's children exist because of you. That makes you family in my book. The ship's communication system crackled again. Bridge to Captain Kim. 10 minutes until turbulence contact. Jeho stepped forward. Gentlemen, I apologize, but we need to make a decision. Once the solar winds hit, all passenger movement will be suspended for safety reasons. Hansol looked around the room, at the faces watching him. He saw no pity in their expressions, only respect and genuine concern. His hand tightened slightly on his mobility aid. Mr. Thompson, he said finally, are you sure about this? The economy seats weren't designed for someone of your height. Big Shaq smiled. I grew up playing basketball in a basement with a 6-foot ceiling. I learned to duck. His expression grew more serious. Please, accept this. Not as charity, but as a thank you. From my family to the man who saved our future. Sumai stepped forward with her tablet. All the paperwork is ready, sir. We just need your agreement. Hansol was quiet for a moment longer. Then he looked at Big Shaq again. Tell me about your cousin's children. Big Shaq's face lit up. The youngest one, she's 4, already taller than most kids her age. The middle one loves spaceships, has models of all the defense fleet vessels. And the oldest, he reached for his phone, showing Hansol a picture. She wrote a school paper about the Battle of Proxima Station. Got an A+. Looking at the photo, Hansol's expression softened. She looks like she could be a basketball player too. Maybe, Big Shaq laughed. But she says she wants to be a starship captain. Captain Jeho checked his tablet again. 7 minutes, gentlemen. Hansol straightened in his chair, his military training showing in his posture despite his injury. Mr. Thompson, if you're absolutely certain about this. I am, Big Shaq said firmly. Then I accept with gratitude. Hansol held out his hand. And please, call me Hansol. Big Shaq shook the offered hand carefully. I'm Marcus, and the gratitude is all mine." The next few minutes were a flurry of activity. Su Mai and Du Won helped move Han Sol's belongings to the first-class suite, while Tai Young assisted Big Shaq with his move to economy. The basketball star had to duck under every doorway, but his smile never wavered. Just as the last items were being moved, the ship's warning system activated. "Attention all passengers. We are entering a zone of solar wind turbulence. Please return to your seats and secure all loose items." In his new first-class suite, Han Sol found something Big Shaq had left behind: a basketball signed by his entire team. A note was attached to remind you that sometimes the biggest victories come from the smallest chances. "Thank you for taking that chance 5 years ago." Back in economy class, Big Shaq settled into his seat, his knees almost touching the seat in front. The young child who had been talking to Han Sol earlier woke up and stared at him with wide eyes. "You're really tall," she said sleepily. "Yes, I am," Big Shaq smiled. "But you know what? Sometimes the biggest heroes are the quiet ones who don't stand out in a crowd." The child's mother, who had watched the whole seat exchange, smiled gratefully. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing her what real respect looks like." As the solar winds began to buffet the ship, Captain Jai-ho returned to the bridge. He thought about what he had just witnessed, a simple exchange of seats that meant so much more. In all his years of space travel, he had never seen anything quite like it. The stellar dream continued its journey through space, carrying its passengers toward Mars. In first class, a veteran who had saved humanity rested comfortably for the first time in years. In economy, a basketball star who had just grown even taller in everyone's eyes prepared for an uncomfortable but deeply satisfying journey. 20 years had passed since that memorable journey on the stellar dream. Captain Minna Yang stood at the command center of the Earth Defense Force's newest flagship, the EDF Swift Guardian Aya. She looked out at the stars, remembering the day that had shaped her career choice. She had been just a young space cadet then, traveling to her first posting. Her economy class seat had given her a perfect view of something extraordinary: a famous basketball player giving up his luxury suite for a veteran with a mobility aid. "Captain," her first officer said, interrupting her thoughts, "the new crew members have arrived for orientation." Minna nodded. "Send them in." 20 young officers filed into the command center. They stood at attention, their uniforms crisp and new. Minna looked at their eager faces and smiled. Every year, she told this story to new crew members. It was a tradition she had started when she first became captain. "At ease," she said, "before we begin your orientation, I want to tell you about 2 men I met on my first space journey. Their actions taught me what true leadership means." The young officers relaxed slightly, curious about their captain's story. Minna walked to the center of the room, where a display showed their ship's namesake, the original Swift Guardian. 20 years ago, I was traveling to my first posting, just like you are today. During that journey, I witnessed something that changed my understanding of honor and respect forever." She told them about Han Sol Park, the hero of Proxima Station, and how he had sat quietly in economy class despite his injury. She described Marcus "Big Shaq" Thompson, the basketball star who gave up his luxury suite when he learned who Park was. But the real lesson, Minna continued, came after the seat exchange. She described how, during the solar wind turbulence, Big Shaq had helped calm frightened children in economy class by teaching them basketball hand signals. How Han Sol Park had used his military experience to assist the crew in stabilizing passengers during the roughest parts of the journey. Neither man sought attention for their actions. They simply did what they believed was right. Minna walked to her captain's chair and picked up something she kept there: an old, worn basketball. "This ball has been passed down through 3 captains of this ship. It was a gift from Marcus Thompson to Han Sol Park, who later donated it to the Space Force Academy." The young officers looked at the ball with new interest. Some of them had probably seen it before, not knowing its significance. The signature has nearly faded now, Minna said, but the message remains clear. Sometimes the biggest victories come from the smallest chances. She set the ball back in its place of honor. That journey changed many lives. The story spread, though neither man sought publicity. It inspired a movement within the Space Force to better honor our veterans. It led to changes in ship design, making all classes more accessible for passengers with mobility aids. One of the young officers raised her hand. "Captain, what happened to them?" "To Park and Thompson." Minna smiled. Han Sol Park became an instructor at the Space Force Academy, teaching strategy and ethics. His lessons always emphasize that true courage isn't about grand gestures, but about doing what's right, even when it's difficult. She walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Marcus Thompson continued his basketball career, but he also started a foundation that helps veterans travel to see their families. He never spoke publicly about what inspired him to start it. The ship's communication system activated. "Bridge to Captain Yang. We have clearance for departure." "Thank you," Minna responded. She turned back to her new crew members. "Today, you begin your own journey. Remember this story. Remember that leadership isn't about the size of your quarters or the rank on your shoulder. It's about the choices you make when no one is watching." She pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared, showing their planned route. "Our mission is to patrol the same sector where the original Swift Guardian made history. Every time we pass Proxima Station, we give a small salute, not just for the battle that was won there, but for all the quiet acts of respect that followed." The young officers straightened their uniforms, inspired by their captain's words. Minna looked at them with pride. She knew that some of them would face their own moments of choice, their own opportunities to show respect and kindness. "One more thing," she said. "In the recreation area of this ship, you'll find both a basketball court and a memorial to the Swift Guardian. They're next to each other for a reason. They remind us that heroism comes in many forms." The ship's engines hummed to life around them. Minna sat in her captain's chair, the old basketball secure in its place beside her. "Prepare for departure," she ordered. As the Swift Guardian Aya moved away from Earth's orbit, Minna thought about that long-ago journey. She had been so young then, watching a simple act of kindness that would shape her entire career. The basketball star and the veteran had shown her that true greatness isn't about personal comfort or public recognition. It's about lifting others up, about honoring those who served, about doing what's right simply because it's right. "Course set, Captain," her navigator reported. "Very good," Minna said. She looked at her new crew members, still standing at attention. "Remember, every journey is an opportunity to make a difference. Sometimes it's as simple as giving up your seat. Sometimes it's as complex as flying into danger to save others. But always, always, it's about respect." The Swift Guardian Aya accelerated smoothly into space, carrying its crew toward their future. Behind Minna's captain's chair, the old basketball sat in its place of honor, its faded signatures a quiet reminder that the greatest journeys aren't measured in light years, but in the lives we touch along the way.